I'm just going to explain this troubleshooting so you don't think it's just messing around. What Shirley noticed was during the last session the recording was dropped out, and so but also she'd been contacted by someone at a library saying we're not seeing the streaming. So I'm trying to do it short of rebooting the entire computer. So I'm just going to have a look at the chat to see. Yay! So now it looks like the recording is on, so there's going to be this really boring session with me explaining this bit now, but I thought in light of our troubleshooting today, it's better to explain it rather than go, Ellen's doing something mysterious here. Ellen is trying not to get stressed about this in public. So, yes, so hopefully it should all be hopefully now and working here and Tamworth, and I'll just do a share the screen. Recording is still on. Yep, we've still got the little red dot.
Thank you. Okay, we're back. Thank you for your patience. We're now going to hear from Corinna Pierce, who is the Customer Service Team Leader at Woollahra. Please welcome Corinna.
Yes, hello everyone. So I'm going to talk about how we rove at Woollahra Library in particular. It's our main library. But first of all, I'll give you a bit of a background. We moved buildings around about almost a year ago now. This was our old building. It was an old house built in 1893, completely unfit for purpose in 2015. It was 468 square metres big, way too small. We couldn't fit all the books in. There was no seating space. No one could study. And so basically we had to move, and we moved last year. And we moved into a new building built just for us. As you can see, there's 3 levels there. It's now 2,234 square metres, and it's going fabulously. We moved into a shopping area, and you'll see from here are our statistics. This is the first 6 months of statistics, and everything's skyrocketed, basically. On the best day in our old library, we had around about 400 visits. That was on a good day. We now average around 2,000 visits a day. Weekends are our busiest times. We get 340 visits in an hour. And we've had a 787% increase in new membership in 6 months. And more than 7,134 new members in that 6 months. What we didn't get was any new staff. So we've got a massively bigger library. We're over 3 levels rather than just the 2. We've got all these new customers, and we expected that to happen, not quite to the extent it did, but we did expect to be busier. So we thought, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to manage it? Because we knew we weren't going to get any staff for at least the first 6 to 12 months. So we introduced this self-service philosophy. RFID technology and the self-checkers we already had, and we'd had those for few years, actually, like 5 years before, so we're partially there. We introduced an automatic returns unit in the new place, tap and go cards, so customers, just tap onto everything. And we've got online payments, so there's no cash register. Staff don't have to handle any kind of payment at all. So we've introduced that. We've also introduced a concierge model. You can see Patrick standing there, and he's dressed exactly as I am here, you'll notice. We've got, so as you can see, you can't quite see me behind here, but we're carrying around an iPad in a pouch. If you're wondering, the pouch is by a company called Woollahra. It took me quite a bit of research to find these. It's modulr.com, so it comes from America. You can fit everything in it. We've got little pen spot. We've got the cards we can fit in this one. We've got the iPad, of course, and it's an iPad Air, so it's nice and light. We've got different types of headsets, and staff could choose which kind they wanted. So there's the Apple ones which you plug in, which are great. Or if you hate stuff around your neck, there's just the Bluetooth one, which I like. So when the phone rings, you just stick it in your ear. Also, if you don't like it round, if you're on the desk all day and you don't want it round your shoulders all day, you can also, it's adaptable, so you can shorten this and it can go around your waist as well, which is great. Also, we all wear a badge. You'll see it. I'm just trying to put it back on. We've all got, our blue. Oh. We've all got our blue badge here, so we're identifiable. So while we're walking around, because we had a big discussion, and you probably all have, about uniforms and if we wanted them and if we didn't, and how we're going to be identifiable while we're walking around. No one wanted a uniform. So the compromise was that we all wear the same colours. So we all wear black, white or grey. And customers can see us that way. Now also, because we're wandering around, roving around, customers sometimes can't find us, even though we're so obvious. And so if they're standing at the returns desk, we developed this button here. And you'll see on there, it says press for assistance. This is an ongoing training thing because, no one reads signs anyway. But so we're constantly having to tell people, if you can't find us, just go to the desk, press the button, and then that beeps on our iPads as well, so we can hear that, and then we go to the relevant desk. All of the iPads are set up especially for the different levels. So this is our level 2 service point. So if you're working on level 2, you pick up the iPad for level 2, so when someone pressed that button, this would ding and not the level 1 one. Now you can see the service point isn't a sit-down one either, it's a stand-up one, so this encourages everyone to wander around, because you can't just sit there and do other stuff. You have to keep moving. So also, to help our self-service philosophy, we had this skin developed for all of our OPACs, and this sits on the front of every single OPAC that we have around the 3 levels of the library. And they're our first point of call for, I'd say 95% of customer inquiries. We take the customer up to the OPACs, and most things that we need are already on there. So you'll see we've got the catalogue search there, events button, the library website, join the library. So yeah, we take customers up to their first thing as soon as they ask a question. And we find that this empowers customers to help themselves. They like it. You go up and they say, have you got this book, or where do I find this? And instead of looking it up for them, we take them over to the OPACs. And if they don't want to type, if they don't want to do it themselves, that's fine, we do it for them. But at least next time they'll go, oh, maybe I could have a go next time. And, quite often they see how easy it is, and they're very happy. Now, before we introduced the roving, the staff had a number of concerns and a lot of questions. And so we went through all of them and we talked about it as a team and came up with lots of solutions. One of the main questions were why are we roving? Why are we doing this? And that's because we knew we were going to be busy and we knew we had to cover all this area. Who do I approach? Because I'll go through them all in a little bit more detail in a minute. What tech do I use? What if there are no customers around to help? And how long do I spend with one customer? And how do I monitor that? How do I get away from people if I want to, And I should mention, in preparation for the roving, we started to roll it out before we moved buildings as well. So even in our old library, we got rid of our desk probably 5 years ago and had a sit-down, shoulder-to-shoulder welcome desk, we called it. So any queries, the customer would sit next to us. So it was a shared screen, so everything was shared. And before we moved, we introduced online membership. So instead of typing it for someone, we take them to the screen and do the online process. We started to roll it all out before we moved because, because we knew we were going to be busy from day one in the new library, and we were. So why are we roving? The reasons are gives us the opportunity to engage more with those who might be reluctant to come up to a desk and ask for help. It's a more welcoming and proactive service, allows us to better promote other things in the library like events, the library services, the e-resources, readers advisory. It gives you the opportunity to talk to people about all kinds of other things as well. And it allows us to give customers the confidence to help themselves too. And lots of people who are not very familiar with technology, they do find, you see them the next time going up and using the technology themselves, which is great. But we do hover around as well, just to make sure we don't just leave them on their own. So who do I approach? Now, one of the staff's main concerns was, you hate walking into a shop and everyone's like, hello, hello, hello. We didn't want to be like that. So we drew up this, these guidelines for who to approach and who to leave, doing their own thing. So look for eye contact is one of the things. If someone's giving you eye contact, they won't mind you saying hello and asking if you need anything. Whereas if someone's, completely avoiding eye contact, they probably don't want you to talk to them. And we identified certain situations and locations where customers would need help and want the attention. So if we're around the front of the building, we say hello to everyone who walks in. They don't have to answer, we say hello. Those wandering around fiction, empty-handed, as we're wandering around, we say, you're looking for anything? Yes or no, and we're off. People using the RFID machines, we hang around there very often, walking around, because often they'll go, oh, well, and they'll look behind, and if we're there, that's great, Adults with children in the non-fiction area might be doing a homework assignment. They generally welcome some help. And we walk past the public PCs a lot as well, because often, someone will get stuck, and again, they look around, and if you're wandering around there, they just put their hand up, ask you a quick question. I forgot to show the slide for that. There you go. There's that. What do I use when was also a big question that we had to work out. Like, when do we use the iPads, and when do we use those OPACs, and when do we use the staff PC? There's only one staff PC on each level. So we try and keep that free for more complicated queries generally. So as I was saying, first thing we do is for new members, catalogue searches, any event and room bookings, even the interlibrary loan and purchase suggestions, we take the customer to the OPAC and work through it with them, standing side by side at the OPAC. If it's going to be a little bit more extended, for example, a database search, we book them onto one of the PCs and sit down next to them and help them get started with that at least. And then the staff PC we would only use for finalising new membership. So once they've done all their business, then they come to the staff PC, show us their ID, and we finish that off. Just takes 10 seconds, basically. Any, little bit more tricky issues, we also do on the staff PC, and back-end issues, the PC and room bookings we need to sort out, and anything a little bit more detailed. And then the iPad we've got Skype for Business loaded on here, so all the phone calls for the floor come through the iPad. Queue management, so if especially on the first floor, if there's a little bit of a queue forming at the service point, then the other person on the floor will come and help the customer with the iPad. It's not as good as the PC because, it's obviously smaller and a little bit more. But it's a backup, and at least the customer feels like, you're helping them and they're not just standing in a queue waiting. The Prowler alerts, so as I was saying, when the customer presses the button, it alerts on here. And as you're walking around, if there's any immediate queries, at least, you can help them on the spot with the iPad. Another staff question was, what if there are no customers to help? And I can't just sit behind the desk and do my other jobs that I would normally do. Well, there's always lots of tidying to do, and so as we all know, it never ends, all the tidying and the displays, But we also encourage staff not to concentrate on that too much. They do a little bit of tidying and then you wander around, and a little bit of shelving and then wander around. So it's constantly been on the move, basically. And then there's the kind of the customer control. How long do I spend with each customer? We try to tell staff that, well, they're basically in control of that. It's not really up to the customer. It's up to them to manage the situation. So we empowered them to be able to manage the situation. If they get difficult tech questions, we've got a Tech Connect service, which is on once a week at each of our branches. And so that's a one-on-one tech help. So if something's going to take more than, say, 15 minutes, then the staff would say, well, come to our Tech Connect and we can help you in for an hour then. We've also got an Ask the Library Q&A page, which we copied from the State Library. It's run by RefTracker. And basically the customer types in any question and then we get back to them. And also when it's really busy, you know, we told staff, set someone up wherever and you can leave, help someone else, and then just keep coming back to the customers to make sure they're okay. So if they're searching a database, you know, get them to sit down, set them up, show them what to do, and then go and do what else you've got to do, and then come back, check they're okay. So just lots of, you know, to-ing and fro-ing, and then you can be serving like 5 people at a time, which we quite often are. However, I'll just finish by saying, although we're quite often serving 5 people at a time at the moment, we have just got the approval for some more staff. I just did almost 100 interviews the past few weeks, because we've just got a bunch of money from the council, which was fabulous. So we've got like 8 new positions which we're just filling. So we will have some help on the floor, which means we will be able to spend more time with individual people, which is fabulous for everyone. Now, I've bought copies of our roving procedure. If anyone wanted one today, I can leave them at the front or something. But otherwise, that's it. Anyone got any questions? Yeah. We just shelve when we can.
And do you get that opportunity?
Yeah, we do. Yeah. We also, as part of the new library, employed a volunteer coordinator who got a whole new lot of volunteers for us as well, and they help us with the shelving and shelf tidying too. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
How many staff will be on it?
So 4 people on level 1, including 1 in the returns room, and then 1 on level 2 and 1 on level 3. And level 3 comes down and roams around the whole place, because level 3 is like a study space and not many people need help up there. So, there's not much to do. So, what was that? 4, 5, 6. Yeah.
Sorry, so that was
yeah.
my question. You mentioned study space.
Yeah.
So how are your public PCs laid out on those levels? And say the study area where someone wants to have an hour or more or whatever to work on.
On level 3, we've got 4 PCs and they're bookable for 4 hours. Level 2, we've got 8. No, 10. And we've got 14. We've got them in all different places. And mostly they're bookable for 4 hours. Some are bookable for 2 hours.
Do they have a seat or do they stand up?
No, they're all sitting down. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions.
Yeah.
The first thing is, when you're on the phone,
Yeah.
you hear the phone
Yeah.
somehow or other,
Yeah.
and you're on the phone to someone and you're still roaming
Yeah.
and everything, and you're
Yeah.
on the phone. Does that not put your patrons off if you're on the phone and they wonder what you're doing because they won't come near you because you're on the phone?
Yeah, well, what happens is the phone just rings, just like the iPad just rings, like a phone. So if you're talking to someone, you would ignore it, basically, and it would, there's like a queue, so it would go to the next person in the queue if it's not answered. So firstly, when a customer calls the library, first it goes to our admin people, and there's 2 of them, and so it just moves around. And it only comes to the floor if it hasn't been answered in the other places. So it doesn't ring all that often, probably a few times a shift, but it's a good backup. We use it mostly for internal calls to shelf check. So if one of the branches calls up and says, can you find this, that's when it'll ring.
The other question.
Yeah.
What LMS do you have? Because it's to do with my next question.
Yeah, Libero.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know Libero.
Yeah.
You were saying about the fact that you are either on the iPad with
Yeah.
the person
Yeah.
or at the PC with someone,
Yeah.
and they're asking you about a book availability,
Yeah.
and they're right beside you, and the book isn't available because it's out to someone,
Yeah.
for example.
Yeah.
But you can only see that if you click on and then it shows in some of the LMSs, certainly the one we have at the moment, it shows who it's out to, which is why we don't show the screen to anyone.
Right, no, you can't see that on
You
ours.
cannot see
No,
that. You can
no.
just see it's unavailable.
That's right.
Oh, like the OPAC that we have, which is out on this,
Exactly.
that everyone else has.
That's right.
All right, so it's not
Yeah.
the South one.
And then if they want to reserve it, they just press the reserve button. Yeah. No. No. Yeah. No, we don't. So fortunately, because it's a brand new building, one of the main things that we demanded actually, the library manager demanded that we have the best Wi-Fi that is, possibly available at the moment, and we've got that. Yeah. Yes. No, it's a separate line. There's a staff one and there's a customer one. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
How long are your shifts for?
4 hours. But in my team, there's people who work on the desk all day. So, there'd be 4 hours, an hour lunch, and then another 4 hours, or 3 hours. So it could be 7 hours on the floor. Yeah. Yes, that's one of the questions while we interview is how would you deal with that? It could be on your feet the whole day. Yeah. Yeah.
How would you say if you're on roving on the top floor?
Yeah.
You're encountering a roving customer.
Yeah.
How is that dealt?
Well, good question. I just recently got some, I didn't bring one with me, but a little duress alarm. So you press that and it goes straight through security who come immediately. Yeah. 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 Oh, well, there isn't a picture. Oh, if you can see on there, there's a little hole in the wall there. And so basically it goes on a conveyor belt. It goes along, it gets returned, it goes up a thing which sorts it and shakes it, and then it goes on another conveyor belt across this way, and then it's got these things that tip either way. So it goes along, it gets sorted, it gets returned, and it gets tipped to whichever level or branch it's going to, sorted out for you. So then the staff just have to pull it out of the bins and put it on the right trolley. And then when the people on the desk have got time, they come and get the trolley and take it upstairs. Yeah. Yeah.
So all the staff are just for roving?
No, everyone in the library works on the floor at some point. But in my team, customer service team, predominantly people are on the floor. We've got, some people who are just employed to do customer service. Yeah.
Is that a ratio like manager, supervisor, library assistant?
No segregation at all. The library manager doesn't have much time to do customer service, but the rest of us, it's a very egalitarian workplace. We all shelve, we all answer reference queries, everyone does everything. And if you can't answer a reference query, you could be at any level of the hierarchy and not be able to do something, and it's okay to ask anyone else. We all have our different skills and areas of expertise, as we all know. Yeah.
You didn't mention about
You go first. You start.
the volunteers helping you with the shelving.
Yeah.
Is there any other tasks that the volunteers have?
Yes. So when they apply, they're interviewed for different roles. So there's the shelving, there's home library service. They go and have cups of tea with the home library service people. With slide duty. I don't know if we know, but we introduced the slide into this new library. There isn't a picture of it. But we very, very quickly realised that we needed someone to sit at the top of the slide to stop, 5 kids going down at once. It's a pretty steep slide as well. So, we're recruiting now for some more volunteers to be slide monitor, basically. And the rule is you've got to count to 5 between each child, and we make them count, so it's good numbering, lesson. And feet first, yeah. Yeah, sorry, yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. No, go, yeah. Well, we have a rule that we only employ volunteers for certain roles, and that policy comes from HR, so we follow that. And basically, it's how we think of it is we couldn't offer these services if we didn't have volunteers. We couldn't do the home library service because the volunteers can sit and, you know, spend as much time as they have talking to people. If we didn't have volunteers to man the slide, we'd probably have to close the slide. Council hasn't got the money to employ staff to do that. So the way we view it is it offers more to the community. You know, volunteering is people giving their time.
Sure.
So we might have time for just one more question.
Yeah.
Just wondering with your OPAC and your online catalogue, we actually use Libero as well, but ours looks very, very different from yours. And I was wondering whether that was something that you guys had worked with and built and changed the interface.
Well, that was just a skin, so that just leads to Libero. So that's not actually Libero what I showed. That's just a skin with a button that takes you to Libero.
Okay. Yeah, even the online one looks very different.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You got the latest version? Latest?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, I don't know then.
Okay, that's all right. I just thought I'd ask because I thought, oh, that looks something like that.
I don't know. It might just be the skin around it that our IT department's built. Maybe. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sure if anyone else has any questions, are you available for
Yes,
people to contact
sure.
you?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, no problem.
That'd be great.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, now Kathy touched on this a little bit earlier, the subject of fake news. She's now going to come up and talk to us about it a little bit more. Thanks, Kathy.
Some days I feel like a sucker for punishment, but today's not one of them. Okay, this is in fact another interactive session, and I will be shortly running around with this, and you will be answering. But first, now for those who did the pre-reading for this seminar, you would have read this piece. Indeed, the seminar preamble references this very article. Collective memory forms the basis of history. People's understanding of history shapes how they think about the future. Social networks especially can powerfully shape memory. Communication shapes memory. So memory can be distorted. For those who followed through the links on today's seminar agenda, you would have also made the most of this article, where Programming Librarian has compiled a roundup of resources to help support libraries deliver their best programming about fake news. From webinars to LibGuides, news articles and other resources, there is a wealth of information here to inform you. You would, of course, gone on to watch this webinar. And downloaded the list of resources shared in the webinar and the iSchool fake news handout. And to be honest, it's this little handout where the key resources are. Quick visual tools that get you quickly across the topic. And of course, you would have all acted on the seminar booking email that went out on Monday that inspired you to go and check out the fake news page on the RISC Wiki, where you would have found this delightful number from the oatmeal on the backfire effect. You should all read this. You should all read it all the way through to the end. Go through the whole thing. Go on that journey, because it helps build sufficient skills for handling fake news through increased understanding of how people change their mind. Now, this is just that little leading to the murky reality of untruth. But my question to you here now, that's going to have me wandering around the room yet again, are what are some steps that you could take in your library? What resources are you using to help yourselves and your library members manage the plethora of fake news that exists? How do you recognise it? What do you do about it? Do you in fact see it as an issue right here, right now, or one that seems to be happening somewhere else in the Northern Hemisphere, roughly that way somewhere, and of no concern to you or your library right now? And that's my question to you. So, turning the camera around, making some slight adjustments without hopefully breaking it. Okay. Fake news. What is it?
Donald Trump's Twitter feed.
Donald Trump's But occasionally, he does in fact tweet the truth. So how do you recognise the difference? Because if you've been paying attention to Donald Trump's Twitter feed, you would have in fact noticed that he put out there, put his hand up and said, yep, I had a chat with the Russian guy. But all the other people doing their Twitter feed and their White House media briefings, no, he didn't say a thing. Where's the truth? Where's the lie? How do you recognise it? What tools do you use to help your customers, your library members, work it out? And, when we mentioned Donald Trump's Twitter feed, that's the murky reality. So what have we got out there? Have we actually had a read through those articles and gone, oh, wow, here are some useful resources? I think a comment was made, actually it was Andrew who made it. Do you remember where I got my information from? So I mentioned the fake news page on the Reference and Information Services Group Wiki. Who actually had a look at it? Hands up. Come on, people. I know Andrew looked at it. No one looked at it. Andrew made a comment that on that particular page, it references a number of things. One of the things it references is an ALA LibGuide and a summary of tips. Can you think of what some of those tips might be? I'm going to start handing the microphone over and asking you to give some tips for recognising fake news. Check the source. Check the source. How do I check a source? Why Google it? What else?
Go to your local library and ask the reference. Peer review.
Peer review. Now my source is Fox News. You may be reluctant if Fox News is your source to consider other sources of news, so it may be really hard for you to actually engage with the fact that Fox News is one of the sources of fake news coming out in a lot of ways. So it's how you provide other information sources to balance that, and how you provide reputable sources of information, and it might be one or two others that balance. But if someone is a massive fan of Fox News, it's kind of going to be trouble to shift their brains. It doesn't mean you don't try, but they probably do think that things like the New York Times and the Washington Post are evil left-wing publications, and the Guardian so far left they probably, don't exist. So it's really seeking what is there a question about, provided they're actually looking for information. But I think it really is about proactively helping people learn how to evaluate sources of news through what is actually being said, who else is verifying it, Is this the only news place that is saying this? Are they being really emotive, or are they actually being quite balanced? Are they basically name-calling of people who disagree? So it is that digging a bit deeper. And I have to say, I don't think we've got a high moral ground on fake news with the Americans. We've got a bit of that happening in Australia too. So, yeah, we have to look after people for local news as well. But it does raise an interesting point that not so much because of fake news, but because of fake news, we have an increased need to evaluate more sources in order to provide the adequate amount of information so that people can make their own minds up. So when you go through the oatmeal and you look at just what makes people change their mind about something, how they think, what drives that. And the first article talks about social media can shape memory. And it was in reading that article that I started to think slightly differently about the whole subject. And I started to think about myth. Who here happens to be a Neil Gaiman fan? Who here has read American Gods? Who here loved it? Who here is either watching American Gods, waiting for American Gods to come out on DVD so that they can watch it, or staying well clear because the book's far better. There can't be anything like that. Waiting for the DVD? Oh, yeah, because, I need to binge it. So, for those who've got no idea about what American Gods is actually about, obviously, America and gods, but not just any gods. This is a rewrite of Norse mythology. It's a rewrite of a story that's already been handed down over millennia and already is established within the psyche of people's cultural consciousness. They know the story. And then Neil Gaiman comes along and he rewrites the story and gives it a twist. And it's great. But what other kind of stories get rewritten? Who loves the Avengers? What about the character of Thor? Asgard. How do they appear? Is that the same as your thought from your reading of what you might think they look like? Here's an interpretation. So I watched Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 last night. It's great. But it made me really think. Yeah, no spoilers. My kids have been great because they watched it weeks ago and they didn't say a word. But it made me really think about my reading of Norse mythology, the presentation in culture of the Avengers and Norse mythology, American Gods as it's written and its interpretation, the TV series, and as it's written, comics, that presentation, all of these takes on one thing and the conversation that happens on social media and in newspapers about what that story is changes. So now it's a story where Thor is a god and he throws a hammer and he's got blonde hair. He might not have been blonde, but that now becomes part of the cultural acceptance. So fake news is a lot like that. We can change how people think about something, what their memory of something is, simply by sharing a different story about it. And one of the other articles also makes comment that when you know that there is an untruth that has been put out there on social media, the way you combat the untruth is to present a related fact in such a way that can be verified. You're not so much saying you're wrong, you're a liar. You're going, oh look, this is related and it's true, and I can actually show you how it's true. So you present an alternative that's more acceptable. So I come along and go, oh, you know what, you might be right. I've changed your mind by presenting a fact. So it still brings us back to the discussion about what we can do as librarians, reference librarians, with the resources we have in front of us, in our libraries, on our shelves, online, to actually handle some of these fake news and inaccurate information that gains momentum because it's on social media. So does anyone have any other thoughts about how you can use your skills as a reference librarian to actually combat some of this, or to present reality in a new way? I'm now on the second line and I'm going to target someone. John.
I guess, just making sure, like, even if someone, like in your instance, say, if someone said something and you've said, okay, that isn't true, you would still actually check what the second person actually said is true as well. So no matter what anyone says, always having a bit of skepticism of that, especially on social media, and especially with images that are posted. That's definitely one you should always check, because photos can be easily doctored. Or even, like, I remember seeing one of a photo of a sign in a library, and they're saying, oh, that was actually in a library that was part of an advertisement. And someone actually confirmed what ad it was from, and then linked to it. So I guess, yeah, always checking your facts.
We have an example.
Yes, Elvis and the UFO, seen over England, I think it was 10 days ago. It was actually related on the BBC News, and they said there was 150 people who saw it. True.
But the flat Earth thing and the moon landing thing that's going on, those people don't really, they don't want to be have their mind changed.
No, but you can make it less sure of
But the comment about pictures is a good one. Point 9. Photos may be misidentified, misdated, completely unrelated to the topic. It's clickbait. It's that headline that gets you in, but then it's not about the thing it is about. Now, how many times have you clicked on a thing because, cool, that photo, you actually want to know more about that photo, but the article's something completely different than other photos that they put up there. Not one of them is, in fact, that photo. Yep, big me. Thank God. Dreadfully frustrated because I didn't actually get to the photo that I wanted. The clickbait. You know, we talk about clickbait. We talk about the Google search. No, actually, it's number 4. The 4th one's one. It's the first one to advertise. It's looking at that heading that comes through your feed and going, who vets their emails and thinks about, is that spam or is that real? You know, I actually shut down everything on my computer except for my Outlook so that I could open one email because it looked really dodgy. It could have been okay. Turns out it was actually business and it was really important. But the heading, the subject line was such that I was raising questions going to turn my computer up. Which, you know, it then became a phone call going, please, subject line better. So this is the iSchool handout where this image comes from. And it has a whole pile of little graphics that are really, really helpful for breaking down the steps. You know, how to actually do the red flags. You know, they talk about all caps being a classic red flag. Yeah, I mentioned clickbait.
And I think we've all been guilty of falling for it. But when we've mentioned you need to verify your sources, check multiple sources, verify those multiple sources. So whether it's Fox News or The Guardian or Australian Geographic, whether it's a parliamentarian who is pushing their own agenda based on small amounts of information that a particular path has given them, or whether it's actually someone who's putting forward a political opinion that is well informed. A lot of what's coming out of the US is not just Donald Trump's Twitter stream, but it's very much this divide between scientific research, fact, as researched over time, and flat earth theory. You know, I think it's this thing, and gossip and innuendo tells me it's this thing, so it must be that thing, and I'm not going to change my mind. And of course, the moon landing was a hoax. It was just a bunch of guys set up in a room with a camera rolling. And if you've watched Transformers, that must be true. Because, seriously, dark side, scary.
We've got that here, though. We've got clean coal.
I know, right?
We've got the Great Barrier Reef, not so bad.
It's not bleaching.
No. So,
Global warming doesn't exist. It's not happening.
you know, their goal is to muddy the waters so much that you can't find a place to start and find your sources. Think of what you have to look for now just to verify one fact. You have to go to your Guardians and your BBC and your newspapers, and like Pope Francis. I read that about Pope Francis saying that he supports Donald Trump. And I mean, it's just interesting times. Fake news has been around for ages. It wasn't just now. It's how little we forget. It started in the 30s. They were very good at it then, and I can't believe that we're doing it again. Thank you.
And you think we'd be smart. You definitely think we'd be smarter. But it is interesting where that, and I still think it comes down to that question of science and scientific research versus I don't want it to be like that. And of course, coal must be clean because it's not black when you hold it in your hands. When you burn it, it does not create smoke. When you burn it, it doesn't pollute anything. When you process it, it doesn't make the ground boil up and water contaminate. None of that happens, despite research, evidence, and all of those things. So yes, sources are important. Spending time is important. Directing our customers, our library members, to other sources to try. And I suppose that the question then is posed, how many of these questions do you get come through? Do you actually have people coming and going, Earth's flat, I'm really concerned that Earth's flat, and I'm planning to visit Italy next year, and I'm going to fall off? Do you have people coming in with, sometimes you sort of go, well, people just can't be that stupid.
Only around full moon. Only around full moon.
Only around the full moon. Yeah. But you sort of think, how can people be that stupid? Surely they're clever enough to know that the Earth isn't flat. Surely they've seen enough pictures from the International Space Station that shows this big globe spinning that they know it's not flat.
It's a conspiracy. They're just fake photos from the International Space Station, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, they faked it all.
It's like there is an association of flat Earth in America, and they know better.
I think it's important actually when we have these discussions, even if we only have them in our heads, to remember it's not a question of how can they be that dumb. It's a question of how have they been educated? It's not a question of intelligence, it is a question of education.
How do we break that, or how do we help their education along a slightly different, how do we change their mind?
And we do have an educational role in educating them to understand, to question where their information comes from. It's not our job to change their mind.
Most Scientologists come from high socioeconomic backgrounds, and I would imagine they're all pretty highly educated. They're all following that path.
Prejudice,
Even just today on social media was courts have actually quietly admitted that the MMR, the vaccine was going to do. So, and you've got to go back and show people. And I had a person in the library saying, I need to have proof. I want to take the doctor to court because he gave me the MMR for my child. But, you get that.
I haven't seen too many inquiries regarding fake news come through, but there are attitudes that are based on fake news, which to me is ultimately based on fear, because that sells newspapers. But I think what we do for the public is actually, for our customers, is show them things like this, rather than trying to change their mind. Just let them know that fake news exists and there are things that they can do, or our staff, or make our staff aware that fake news actually exists, and that there are strategies to identify it, rather than trying to say, well, the Earth's round. You didn't explain.
Can I just say something? I find it interesting that I suppose our views about what is fake perhaps have changed as well. I remember back in the early 2000s when Wikipedia was derided. Now, I believe probably all of us might have a page on it, or perhaps we've got students who are using it as their primary sources. So I find the whole conversation interesting, because I think our views on this do change as well. And someone actually looking back maybe 50 years in the future might be laughing at us because we actually thought that this was a good way to disseminate information. So.
No, you'll just get an injection.
I think, if anybody did the early versions of 23 Things, one of them was about Wikipedia. Go and edit a wiki page on Wikipedia. I did none of them. I apologise to Katie. But the thing is, I know the information that is there is correct, and I could provide external sources that validate, especially council sources, that validated the information that I put up there on Wikipedia about Nundle. So I changed what was there, which was dreadfully uninformative, and made something that became then something really useful.
In the last couple of years, I've changed the way that I've started to do introduction to research classes. And interesting that you mentioned Thor, because I often use pop culture as a way to explain, would you use this source? And so one of the ones I have is someone in the most terrible cosplay I've ever seen of Iron Man, literally holding an iron, next to a picture of Tony Stark. And I've sort of got the credentials of what the character of Tony Stark is, and then some made-up ones for the dude on the left. And I sort of say, if you had an article, or if you found something on a website and it was about emerging trends in weapons design, whose sort of paper would you believe? And you can sort of see that that's, the cogs would turn, and I'd have more people coming back and asking about, I'd shown them the asterisks and that sort of thing. Oh, what was that star thing that lady showed us the other day? And I sort of noticed a much higher increase when I was using things like that. And Where's Wally was the other one for refining down and using a Where's Wally page. And when you click this, then more things disappear, and maybe that's Wally, and things like that. So I found that using pop culture references for thinking about authenticity and who the author is, and do you know the background of this author? Can you find out, who they are and what their experience is, made a difference to the audience I was going for, I guess.
So I would bring you back. to where we started. Because I'm sure tomorrow, if not later today, everyone will read this article and this one and have a look at some of the tools and resources that are listed there. Really handy. And if you don't get a chance to watch the webinar, you will certainly take a look at the handout, and especially the iSchool handout. It is really, 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 really helpful. And you're going to go through this one, and you're going to have a gander at the oatmeal and the way the neuroscience, science, that word, of how people change their mind. So therefore, what you can do to help better inform your library members. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. To finish off this afternoon, we're going on a little bit of a different track, and I can't wait to hear about it. Has anybody here heard about citizen science? Oh, a couple of hands up. If you have, you'll know that it's really interesting and something that everyone can get involved in, but we're going to learn a bit more about it from Patrick Tegart from the New South Wales Office of Environment and Heritage, and he's going to give us a bit of a talk about it. So please welcome Patrick. Did you have something? Yep.
It's just real good to reach here from the front. Yeah.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And I can use the web?
Yes.
Cool. I should ask, does everyone have a phone with them today? Generally, most people do. Is it a smartphone? So I'm going to start today off a little bit differently, and I'll log in and everything like that. But while I do that, and I'll show you on display in a second, can you log into the website kahoot.it? And I've lost my mouse. Right, I'll show you again once I open.
Oh, I can change it. That's so cool.
For those who wanted the spelling, it's just there. And while I log in, once it lets me log in, I've got to back up if it doesn't. I just wanted to run a quick, simple and easy survey beginning, and you actually asked one of my first questions. And kids citizen science in Australia in many ways is quite new. It's good to see and get a feel of the crowd and see who actually knows what citizen science is. And I'll talk about it a bit more as well in my presentation with a social research project that my colleagues did. Yeah. One of these works, sorry. There we go.
I didn't try.
So let's play. So this will slowly work and load in. So if you've been able to log into kahoot.it, in a second, once this loads its page, you'll be able to see a PIN number if it wants to play. So a PIN number should just appear where ready to join is. And then the next step I'll get you to do, funky music. So if you can enter that in, and then it'll ask you to put a username in. And what I'm doing is it's just 6 easy, simple questions. So don't feel obliged to or stressed about them. So I'll just wait a little bit for it to log in. And what you'll see on your display once I go into the questions and once you've logged into your phone is that I'll ask a question, and under that question there'll be the answers, and that will correspond to what links into your phone. And on your phone you'll have 4 different shapes and colours, and whatever answer you think is most correct, there's no wrong answers, it's just a general survey. You click on that and we'll be able to proceed forward. So how many do I have at the moment? Got a few. Is anyone still trying to log in? Don't need that. It's all right if you aren't able to log in, you can just keep the answer in your head. But I might, because I'm on I've got a time limit, I might proceed into the quiz. So you should have 10 to 20 seconds. And while I'm looking at this is a good engagement tool when you're doing a presentation as well to keep in mind. So I got 47 logged in, and we'll take it away. So as already asked at the start, is prior to this presentation, had you heard of the term citizen science? And if you look on your phone, you should have 2 shapes, one a red triangle or one a blue diamond. Don't worry if you didn't answer it, I've just kept the time frame limited. And as you can see, it's a relatively even split among the group who have heard of it and who haven't heard of it. The next is, what do you think is the best definition to define citizen science? Now, they all may look the same, and that's fine, and all the answers are, I look forward to seeing where it's divided between. Yep, well, it's good to see that everyone likes to see the collaboration between the scientists and the community. I'm all for that, both top down and bottom up, so that's always good. And community-powered research, it's good to see those responses, but none of them are wrong. They're all part of the definition of what citizen science is. Next is, who do you think actually has the most citizen science projects in Australia? Who are the big players in the game? The Australian Museum, CSIRO, local councils, or the Office of Environment and Heritage? And this question in particular, I'll link back into the social research as well. Yep, it's good to see. CSIRO, it's funny enough, that was one of the main organisations picked in the social research as well. But good to know, the Australian Museum has a lot of citizen science projects, and I'll show you one of them at the end of this presentation. The next is just an easy question of, have you volunteered before? I'm sure most of you have. It's an easy one. Yep, so most of you have. And this leads into my next one of whether or not you volunteered into a citizen science project. So I can see the difference between you volunteering and whether or not you volunteered into one of these projects before. Oop, didn't want to display it. And the final one is, if you were to join a citizen science project in the future, would you want the topic to be on climate change, transcribing text from historical documents, online image processing, or helping protect and understand threatened species? And hopefully that shows me the graph. Oops, I skipped it. That's all right. So thank you for joining that little quiz. Well, Alex, well done. There wasn't any points, but you won the game. You can, so for those interested, you can actually, like if you're working with schools or anything like that, you can put points to your questions, and it can be a bit of an interactive game as well. So thank you for joining that. But I'll go into my presentation. And what I want to talk about today is just give you a bit of an overview of what citizen science is, and then looking at what is and who a citizen scientist is and what actually motivates them to join projects. And this may be useful for not just citizen science projects you may be interested in, but just volunteering programs in general. Then I want to give an overview of a citizen science toolkit and some of the steps you can undertake to create your own project, and some of these components could be useful for projects you currently have, and then show you some citizen science projects at the very end. So, what is citizen science? The Oxford English Dictionary definition says that scientific work undertaken by members of the general public, often in collaboration with or under the direction of professional scientists and scientific institutions, or as you saw in my quiz, put simply, community-powered research. Now, citizen science may be a trending word at the moment, but it's not a new concept. Citizen science has been around for a long while. If you think of bird watching groups, they've been creating and collecting data for many, many decades, and they've been doing it on their own goodwill. They've had their question, they've gone out, not just in Australia, but right across the world. And what we've been able to see of late is that the development and improvement of technology and accessibility to resources, not just in libraries, but on the web, is really engaging a whole new audience in citizen science and drawing them into projects and engaging their curiosity. And this has been reflected right across the world now, with associations being established just for citizen science. So there's the European Citizen Science Association. The USA has their own association. They have a conference running this week where hundreds and thousands of people are actually joining to learn about different projects that are happening in the US and across the globe. And then the Australian Citizen Science Association was established in 2014. And through this interest, positions like my job, which is only relatively new, have been starting to appear to help engage and facilitate these projects and really engage with a new audience. Just this year, funding is now being attracted to citizen science projects. Some of you may have seen, some of you may not have. Inspiring Australia had a 4-year grant round for up to $500,000 for a project to be going into citizen science. And I think that's really rewarding and showing the emphasis that not only just local groups are having on citizen science now, but now big funding bodies are looking at it as well as a valuable source to collect valuable data. And for anyone that's interested, and there'll be more information coming in the following months, the Australian Citizen Science Association will be having a conference in February 2018. So, what is the value of citizen science? I touched upon it briefly, but the European Commission of Environmental Citizen Science broke it into 4 key areas. 1, scientific, 2, educational, 3, social, and 3, policy-based. So when developing a project, if you design it well, it can be a vessel that can help all 4 of these areas. And this leads into and can accomplish creating new collaborations with your library, with new volunteer groups, or it can create new partnerships which could bring new funding into your volunteer group. It can lead to behavioural change. So my expertise is mainly with environmental citizen science, and some things that I've been able to see is skills being developed in school children, or their behaviour changing through conservation awareness, or just having keeping in mind sustainability when they're living at home, just turning off the light switch. There's plenty of scientific outcomes. eBird, a fantastic app from the USA, through thousands, and they've got tens of thousands of volunteers, which is incredible. They've now been able to map range shifts of migratory birds right throughout the US and into South America, and that's been a huge effort. And then there's also education, new funding, as I mentioned, and community engagement that can come out of it. So there's all these great values with citizen science, and it can accomplish a lot of things. But that's only one component of what a citizen science project is. You can have this great idea, but without the volunteers and the people going into it, the project's going to fall apart. So my colleagues decided, as part of the citizen science strategy at OEH, that it's probably worthwhile exploring what actually motivates volunteers to be involved in citizen science. We can assume certain things, but we may be missing other things. So they were able to do this in a range of different ways, but we'll just focus on the focus group, so in a bit of a forum. And then they also had surveys as well, which they asked non-professionals and professionals what they thought about citizen science. And I should just define professionals were in the field of science work. So in a few focus groups, you can see a lot of words up here, and they're scattered around like what I've just done today. The facilitator asked the group, what does citizen science mean to you? And as you can see, you've got some people have no idea. Some people think it's a trick question. They think it's jargon. Others started to get a vibe for it and thought it aligned with the environment or helped with socially challenged questions. What's interesting there is you can see that people relate it to Citizen Kane, which is the 1984 movie, and we think that's probably because not many Australians actually use the term citizen. It's not a word that's really frequently used in everyday language, and that's why it's been listed outdated as well. So the next part, the facilitator then went to explain, just give a bit of a definition of what citizen science is. And straight away, through that little brief explanation, you can see that the phrases that were brought up completely changed. You can see saving the planet. It's about engaging passionate and curious people to answer a question. There's technology in it. And then it drives back into the responsibility that we may have to help support and answer questions that can't just be done by one person. So we got a bit of an understanding of what this group thought about citizen science. But like you saw in my survey question, we wanted to know, do people who are interested in citizen science actually know where to go? And as you can see here, it's pretty much a resounding no. So these are the top 10 mentions from this survey. And as far as I'm aware, and it just highlights the point even more, CSIRO is the only group that actually has citizen science projects. I apologise if the other groups do, but I'm not aware of them. And then as you can see in the circles, that even the professionals in science don't know about citizen science projects or who to go to. And there's great organisations, the Australian Museum, there's international bodies that are looking to help within Australia. And then there's also the National Park Association of New South Wales, all delivering really valuable projects, but nobody knows about them. So is it a question of, are we promoting the wrong way, which is valuable, or is it a part of some of the barriers that come up with citizen science? So as some of you noted, you've worked in volunteer groups or volunteered in the past. If you don't know the organisation, you're probably not going to have the confidence to do the work for them. So it's really trying to establish a relationship with your volunteers so they feel confident to work with you and also see that you'll be supporting them through their journey. As the next is looking at the phrase, the name of citizen science is alienating, and that probably stems from the phrase science. People see science as this completely different thing and may not want to interact with it. And another interesting point from this research project was people lack the confidence as a volunteer to join projects, not because necessarily they didn't think they could do it, but they were afraid of if they joined, they'd ruin the project altogether. So that's an important note, and it's something that I'll reflect upon in the Citizen Science Toolkit. It's also important. Volunteers mentioned that they don't always get the attention they deserve. The volunteers are a backbone of any project, so it's worthwhile celebrating them. And I'm sure the last one doesn't need any explanation. Everyone's time poor. you can't create a project and expect people to be able to join it all the time. So it's really being able to engage to their time limitations. But from this social research, it's not all doom and gloom. These 6 points were identified as what would make a good citizen science project, what would make a good volunteer project. So there needs to be a common purpose. They need to have a passion. You need to encourage them and why it's important, why they need to be involved with this. As I mentioned, clear timeframes are important. You can't just plan ahead without your volunteers knowing what the structures are, what the milestones are, and how they'll be involved. It's good to keep up regular communication. This can go into the celebration of those volunteers, or it could just be with social media being so popular these days. You can use Facebook groups or other forums so you can stay in regular contact with your volunteers and just make them feel comfortable and they can share and discuss their ideas as they're learning through the project with you. And from here, and this is where the research became very valuable, is we went, okay, there's all these components that are necessary. So we started exploring the web and to see what's out there. And I'm not sure if any of you have tried to explore citizen science projects in the past or citizen science in general, but it's a mess. There's heaps of different resources, valuable resources, but it's really, really hard to find something that you may be after. So there's guides, there's apps, there's different portals for you to engage with, but there's really not a lot of toolkits that may help facilitate and just guide people and answer questions for them as they go to put a project together. So it was decided that a toolkit for New South Wales at the very least should be put together. So up now on the OEH page, there's a citizen science toolkit. And as we're doing our review of what's out there, we were reflecting upon how should we break it down. And to do that, we looked into 3 key areas, 1 being explore, 2 being design, and 3 being manage. And that's how we see a project can be broken down. And I'm going to explore these areas with you right now. So as I mentioned, there's the associations, the citizen science associations, and there's a lot of organisations that have resources that are valuable and that you can explore. There's apps. As you can see just on this image down here, that's just a screen grab of some apps that are out there. I've got 50 different apps on my phone that are all citizen science based. And I'm not saying get on your phone, download 50 apps. You explore the apps that are best suited to you. And a lot of them are user friendly, some aren't, and you've got to work that out sometimes by yourself. But there's plenty of those resources that are available and that are helpful. Next is looking at defining your problem. I'm sure everyone once throughout their career have come up with a brilliant idea. It could be a brilliant volunteer opportunity, but an idea is one thing, but to engage people, it's important to define what your question is or what your questions are, because that can help direct the design of your project. Otherwise, you have this big, fabulous idea and lack the direction of where to guide it. Once you have your question, it's important to describe your participants and their involvement. Some of you may have volunteer groups already. Some of you may be looking at getting volunteer groups. A quick thing that we've been doing at OEH is just putting a simple questionnaire together to get a bit of an understanding of who the volunteers are. So you may want to know how old they are, what their time availability is. Are they tech savvy? Are they not tech savvy? Do they have a car? All these things can help deliver and design what your project is and how it's going to function. And the other important part with the exploring is see if somebody else has the same idea as you or something similar. This could form new partnerships. This could help work through some of the teething problems that all projects have, and it could reduce your headache in the long run. Next is engaging your community. So I started to describe who your volunteer base is, and I've also mentioned what your participants' motivations are. So through that same questionnaire, you can start to describe what their skills are like. So as I mentioned, are they tech savvy? Are they retirees? Have they had a whole life and whole career that could be very valuable? It could just be project management. It could be admin skills. All these skills are valuable to a very successful project. And it's good to find out these things while you're putting it together rather than as you're halfway through your project. It's also important to list your key activities. And this is where that questionnaire becomes important, because you go, okay, this is where my volunteer strengths are, but these are the activities I need to do. So you may have sample collection or analysis, validation, transcribing. It's good to have those lists and compare them, and you can then start to identify where the gaps are. And then it's also important, as it was identified with that table, to promote your project. If you don't promote it, and you've got to consistently and continually promote your project, it'll be forgotten. And hopefully through your presentation, fake news will disappear in the not too distant future. Next, you've got your community, you've got your question. How are you going to go about collecting and managing your data? This is one of the points that's generally forgotten. I know when I design a project, I don't want to be thinking about this. This is the dull stuff that can really sort of bore a lot of people, but it's critical to the success of a project. Some projects are massive through crowdsourcing right across the globe. For example, WildCount, which was through ABC's Science Week, had 50,000 images processed in a week, which is huge. It's enormous. And I'll show you Digivolve later, and you can see some of the volunteers that are contributing to that. And their efforts are amazing, and that's why I cannot stress enough. You've got to celebrate your volunteers when you can. It's critical to engaging and sustaining them. So as I put up there, you may be collecting your data through paper form or through a website, through an app. It's important to identify that and then look into them. There may be flaws in how you collect it and may need to be tinkered. And that also reflects back to your participants' skills. So you've identified who they are, you've identified their skills, and now you're looking at what data do I need them to collect for me or to analyse for me. And then this can help identify what resources you may need to help them and guide them through their project, or help yourself. There's a lot of things that happen when you put a project together that you can often forget. So it's important to reflect upon this, and that goes back into exploring. There's a lot of things already there, so you don't need to waste time. We all generally are working on a shoestring budget, so it's good to share those resources where you can. And then finally, have a bit of a plan to share your results. Volunteers want to know how a project's going. They want to know how their contributions are affecting or answering the question of that project. And it's also sharing back to the shareholders and the partnerships that you may develop as you create a project. And then after you've done all these components, you should be looking at creating a plan. So it doesn't always need to be exact, but it is important to map your timeline. And by map your timeline, I'm not just talking about the project in general. I'm talking about the prep work. How you're going to go about that. Who's doing that? You can designate the roles. You don't want to just put all that work on yourself. You can separate that and make sure by putting goals and milestones, people have an idea of what you're trying to work towards. And it also helps with reporting. You've got that timeline. You can then go, oh, I did those workshops, I did those presentations, or I've designed this. And as we know, reports in a lot of ways are the one thing people look at when you're trying to get funding. And that leads me into the budget. There's a lot of different avenues. And as I said, citizen science being a trending phrase, there's funding starting to link back into it. So it is important to recognise that there is funding available, but also recognise that your wonderful and fantastic project ultimately will be limited in many ways by the funding and the resources that you have available. And while I'm on resources, it could be your equipment or even your location. And it's important to list those down in your milestones, goals, and in your project timeline. And to finish on the creating a plan, it's always important to keep your participants and volunteers safe. So doing a bit of a risk assessment for your project where it could come down, or a risk assessment for what risks are there for your volunteers, or any permissions that you may need working with people under 18 or working with people over 18. These are the considerations that you've got to make sure you're looking at. And then the last component of the toolkit was manage. Now, I wish I could come up here today and tell you I have the secret recipe to how to retain your volunteers. I don't. If anyone has it, please let me know, because you're a miracle worker. You're going to lose volunteers. It happens. Going back to eBird, they've got over 20,000 volunteers. It could be more. They've got to keep getting 5,000 to 10,000 new volunteers every year to continue to engage and keep their project running, which is a scary amount. We don't have to worry about that, or you may be thinking about a project of that scale. But a few things that can help retain and sustain your project is celebrating the work they've done. It could just be a gathering or an exhibition at the end of your project to say thank you. At the Australian Citizen Science Association's conference, the big thing that was shouted out all the time, Australians love a barbecue. Just a simple barbecue, people will join, and it's another good relationship builder as well. So it works in two different ways. And evaluations. It's always important to evaluate your project. And that's not necessarily saying you should evaluate your project right at the end. You can carry out evaluations right throughout it. So it could be in the form of questionnaires or feedback forms, but you're just asking simple questions to see, okay, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, and where are the areas of improvement for my project? And that could guide for future projects or help further establish the project you're working on presently. So the last component I'm looking at is example citizen science projects. So as I mentioned, there's plenty. My background's in biodiversity and the environment, so you could probably tell there's a bit of bias up there. But that's not saying there's other disciplines. There's plenty of disciplines that are now looking into citizen science and volunteer programs to help establish and gather data. So some of them I've just got up here. So at its very simplest, I believe this is a University of New England project. You're looking at that top image, you're going, oh yeah, that's just a photo of food and ants eating it. Well, there's different species of ants actually eating those different foods, and they want to know what's the attractant. So that's a simple project. You've got stuff looking at your galaxy, birdwatch, insects, all these different mapping tools. This is just another screenshot of programs of Zooniverse, which I'll show you in a second as well. So if you're interested in biodiversity and environmental projects, the Atlas of Living Australia has established this new portal called BioCollect. And the reason why I think this is valuable is because the web is so convoluted and it's so tricky to find the projects. You now have this resource that's collected all as many biodiversity projects as they can. So you're able to explore what's happening in your area. It's also another good promotional tool that people, as they engage with this website, will go, oh, I'm actually interested in that. I might look it up next time I'm available. Digivol. So this one may relate to you a little bit more with your interest. So Digivol's been running for a while now, and it's so valuable because it's not just necessarily looking at biodiversity. So through the Australian Museum, they have a number of different projects, and they're not just necessarily looking at images being analysed and species being identified, but they've also got a number of records from 50, 100 years old, where the ink and the writing needs to be transcribed to a more readable format. So they've got projects doing that. And you may think, oh, well, that's not really that interesting. But if you look on the right-hand side, so they've got 2,029 volunteers. And if you look at the Digivol legend, Megan Eddy, she's done 104,000 data analysis, which is incredible, which shows that just because you think it may not be interesting doesn't necessarily, it's not interesting to everyone. And then you can see just in a month, I actually know Teresa. She's a fantastic volunteer and is incredible in everything she does. Just in a month, she's gone through 2,200. So you can see the scale and how effective a citizen science project can be, no matter how big or small. I touched upon Zooniverse, and I recommend having a look at this website because Zooniverse, as you can see on the panel, has a range of different disciplines there for you to explore. They're all digital projects, but one of the conditions of putting a project up here is you need a really effective tutorial into the project. You can't just have people going through images without the background to it. So if you're thinking of a digital project, jump on here and look at how they're actually explaining the methodology, how they're processing these images. And I've just indicated two interesting disciplines. You've got your arts and your literature. So you've got people transcribing Shakespeare's work, or you've got other people looking through wartime diaries, and all this evidence could lead to new research, and it's incredibly valuable. And another reason why I like Zooniverse, if it comes up, is that it also is discussing what's happening in those projects in real time. So it's got a bit of a blog, or you could even call it a newspaper as such, where you're able to interact and learn from the project. So you may not be sure about joining a particular project, but you can go then and have a look and see what they're looking at, what they've found. I apologise, I didn't add the photo to this, but I was just looking at it this morning, and one of the images, I think it's attached to this hippo project, is there's a rhino that's been captured on a camera trap, which is just a sensor camera, and there's actually, I'm not sure what the predator is, but it's a small cat riding a rhino. And that's one of those things you're never going to see, but it's just one of those interesting and effective selling mechanisms. Like, I was gobsmacked seeing it. It's just a small cat sitting on top of a rhino. What's it doing there? I don't know. But it can generate more interest. People may want to go and find another image like that. And I should finish with a few field projects and do a bit of a spruik for the OEH and what they're doing, and just show you how different field projects can be. One that I've been working with is the Warrumbungle National Park Fire Recovery Project. So for those who don't know, in 2013, a fire ripped through the national park, and then that was followed a month afterwards by huge amounts of rainfall and basically eroded a lot. I don't know what the figures are, but it's a lot of soil into the creeks and everything like that. So as a way to look at how it's recovering, my colleague and a few others at OEH established a few projects. So one was just bird surveys. So we're just interacting with people who are already doing bird surveys or who are interested in that area. So they're going back 2 times a year with us leading it, collecting and seeing how bird diversity is changing in the burnt versus unburnt areas. And we have been able to determine that just through a citizen science project. The next one is targeting tourists, just visitors to the park. This is just a little photo point where they just put their smartphone on top of it and take a photo. And it's a photo point that shows the recovery of the vegetation over time. They don't have to do anything else. They just need to upload it. And it's as simple as that, but they're contributing valuable data. And then another one is working with another audience. We're working with schools. And it's a water quality project where we're looking at the health of the waterways in Warrumbungle National Park and how that's changing as it's recovered. And it is changing, just the dynamics of the creek. So as everything eroded, they were very sand covered and silt covered. But now as more water is starting to flow through, you're starting to get your diversity and change in structure of your creek bed, which is drawing back your macroinvertebrates and other organisms. Wild count, which I mentioned before, it's a 10-year fauna monitoring program. National park rangers have been taking photos with camera traps for a long time, but had no resources to go through them. And through just one project, they were able to go through 50,000, which if you think as an individual or you think what national park rangers have to do, they don't have the time to go through those images. So it's an effective tool to help support their work and also recognise the work of the volunteers in the national parks. And then the last one is watching this space. So the Save Our Species program has been going for just over a year now, and now there's citizen science projects happening in this space to help protect New South Wales' iconic and threatened species. Before I finish, do we have time?
Yep.
Do we have time? I know it's the end of the day, and it may be a bit much of an ask, but I'd like to do a bit of a group activity through what I've discussed today. So working in small groups or someone next to you, you can work through all 4 of those questions, or you could just pick one of them. So it may just be discussing, all right, my organisation or my volunteer group, what's something citizen science can help benefit it? Maybe reflecting upon the toolkit I was discussing. Or I have this question, and you discuss it with the person next to you and ask, how can citizen science benefit? So happy for you to engage in that. I'll give you a few minutes. Otherwise, if we are time poor, I could just lead into questions.
No, you're fine.
Time-wise? Okay.
It's just people having to leave.
Yeah, that's all right.
And things, don't feel bad.
That's all right. And I'm happy for you to shout ideas. I can be involved in this process.
I think you've got loads of studies potential because I think you can partner with citizen science in your area.
Absolutely.
And really push, get local volunteers involved in, once at Coonabarabra Library, take photographs of wild bundles and those kinds of things. So the geographic stuff.
Yep. And I guess the thing is, with any citizen science project, it doesn't have to go for weeks, months, years. You may just have something that needs to be done in a short period, so you can develop your project to fit that model. I was looking at, there was a state library audit, and a lot of the digitised data was looked at. There may be space for volunteers or a citizen science project there to actually look at what's been digitised. Yeah, I know. You look at the number. It's up here, and you're all the way down here. You're looking up, going, how am I gonna process it? And it may just be something worthwhile exploring. And even if you don't have the volunteer base within your library or your organisation or in your community, start looking global. As you can see, the Zooniverse is a global portal, so it gives opportunities. And Shakespeare literature or wartime diaries, they've developed projects.
I'm signed up for Zooniverse. I tend to they give me a project and do a couple of things from my phone.
Yeah, I'm the same.
I'll go in and I'll do it.
Yeah.
And, I have done backyard bird count. I have done the wing tags, paddock guards, but I usually don't take my phone at lunch. So it's like, I get really excited. Oh, there's a bird wing, trail up and with a wing tag. So I think
yeah, and you'll find out you'll have, look at Digicol. So the person who's gone through a few 100,000 images, they're not one of those people that like jumping the project. I love jumping projects because I'm learning new and different things. But you're going to have that community who's really passionate about that project, and they'll continue with it. And it's trying to make sure you capture and know who they are, so you don't lose them, and make sure you reward them accordingly. So they feel like, if they're doing all that work, you want them to feel special in many ways because they're delivering and answering all your questions in many ways. You've just set up the project for them to do so, or the vessel. Okay.
Yeah, I get addicted to that. I can't read an article without thinking about it.
I'll fix the article, but just like say, there's some really great things about volunteers because it's a holiday time for everybody else.
Yep.
Some of them actually but yes, we have a volunteers recognition, and they have a committed to that
Yeah, I might just jump in here. So with those top volunteers, one of the interesting things I think I what they've been able to help is that they recognise today or they really communicate to a volunteer. Now some of those volunteers there's a portal to go through so they can use their own and then it has to go over.
And it's also saying the scientists having to do that cascade, so they're actually doing the work.
Yeah. And it's funny. I had a private couple of years ago. I woke up at 6 in the morning, forecast the day before, sun. I woke up and drank the rain. And then that scared off the morning. And then to top it off, at least you drive you off. It was 20 to 30 kilometer winds. And you try to use a notepad, page going everywhere, and you try to go, yes, this is amazing. People are going, why am I here? I'm wasting my Saturday. And you got to take them. He's always
say most sites while pollinating down or back out those down in their area, you will actually help get better data from their area range of way. I think it's also the avenue, like I'm just thinking that there's some photo and like actually it's not actual photo.
Yep.
So it needs to be scanned. Yeah. So the library has to scan it to be digitised.
Yeah, you've got different things.
Yeah.
And what you're thinking draw me into the system. So she's been able to really help. Started really small, just work and work. Now the NRM, now everyone's on board. Really practice data. For a while, but now it's got reviews. And the retirees, which you don't know about unless you actually go searching.
Yeah, so maybe that how people might be able to source a lot of scientists working on citizen science. I know there is a because this thing is about that, and I know you sort of touched on bird watching. You might have someone who they're not in a bird watching.
Yeah.
But they have this incredible reality data to allow you to you know, using fairly terrible terms, but it's kind of, you know, scientist community and the library friendly space that we can discuss, but also then correct on to other studies.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it helps reinvigorate I might come back up.
Yep.
So I see a few of you are leaving. Thank you for attending and listening to me. It is the end of the day. If you do have any questions or if you want to discuss some of your ideas, feel free, put your hand up. There's a microphone here, I can come to you, or I can hang around and discuss them with you as well, because I won't be heading back to the office, so I'm happy to have a chat with you and hear your ideas and see where I can point you or how I can help. So, is there any questions?
I think it would be helpful to know is how can libraries kind of find a local citizen science to maybe partner with collaborative work. I don't know what's happening in my area. Yeah.
So did everyone hear that question? Yeah. So it's a tricky one. There's no one answer for it. What I've done in the past when I'm looking for volunteers with a particular expertise is LinkedIn is a good resource. So you can look at, because they're profiling themselves. So they say, I've done this. You can see if they're a retiree in many ways. Otherwise, I've looked at it is that there's a lot of these great groups now on social media where you've got like one, this just shows how much of a nerd I am. I'm on fungi groups. I'm on plant, like my background's marine biology, so I really shouldn't be looking at these and convoluting my own mind. But there's all these groups and people are just joining them and sharing their knowledge. But they're more than happy to. So it's exploring them and starting conversations with them on those groups. So you may see, I need this expertise, and exploring just through there. There's a lot of networking and engagement events that it's maybe worthwhile exploring as well. Like I mentioned with that table, people don't know OEH do citizen science. That's part of my role going, we're actually trying to help support a lot of our research going on by benefiting it or partnering it with citizen science. So if libraries or your organisation is interested, you've got to promote it. You've got to explore that, and you've got to be out there. So eventually, with the hope is that you don't have to go out to them anymore. They recognise you as a possible partner or a collaborator, and to start discussing potential ideas. I know it doesn't give the perfect answer to it, but I guess it's not closing any doors, and it's exploring all the avenues behind those doors.
And so public libraries could invite, say, OEH, Australian Museum, etc., out to talk in their libraries about citizen science?
I think so. I definitely think so. So with OEH, depends on what strategies we need to align it to at the time, but it's structuring projects to meet those questions. I know the Australian Museum, and I know a few of the team in there, and they're happy. They've got a range of fantastic projects that they've been carrying out for a long time. And these are just a couple. I know hopefully through the BioCollect program, it's going to identify more of these. And then through the second Australian Citizen Science Association, we'll be able to start finding more people, not just doing biodiversity-based citizen science projects, but other projects. And the last conference I went to, which was in 2015, I was able to network. And it's probably in many ways how I got this job. As OEH, I was able to network there and explore and then build upon my skills and get there. So I guess I think there's definitely opportunity. And I think it's an untapped resource in many different ways, because the library is traditionally where people went to learn. And touching upon the fake news, we live in a time where we have access to the most information we ever have. But in many ways, you could argue that we're the least intelligent. We're not actually being able to use critical thought. And if we can bring the libraries and all that expertise that's retained in the library and the resources in there, I think that's an excellent way to go forward.
It's actually making me wonder whether we should try and get a public librarian along to that citizen science conference next year.
Possibly.
A massive amount of spluking to public libraries for scientists.
Aaron, and I'm sure with the last structure there was posters and there was also presentations. And Aaron is the president of the Australian Citizen Science Association, and my managers are happy to relay that information or keep up the contact with you.
Yeah, I'd be very, because I think it would be really useful. What do other people think? Because it is sounding like that's a way for, you know, like the networking is critical.
Yep. Just got a question up the back.
Listen, I think what you're doing is fantastic, but how can you reconcile working for an organisation that destroys the environment and rips up the heritage?
It's one, like I foresaw that question coming, and it's not something I'll delve into, but I understand that.
You have to know that you talked about fake news just then.
Yep.
We see it on the news every day.
Yeah.
The one of the men in suits and hard hats.
Yep.
Singing this wonderful story.
Yep.
And yet we're being absolutely destroyed.
Yeah. And I guess you've touched upon a point. We'll categorise the men in suits and hard hats, and we'll look at them. Is if we have a community listening to fake news, absorbing manipulated information, how are we going to change those people in suits and hard hats actually leading and putting policies in that may lead to this? So I see citizen science as a new tool to re-engage those people and go, okay, we've been able to build up your critical thought. You're actually aware of what's going on. So we don't run into these things, because we're all aware there's going to be new legislation or change, and they'll start tinkering little things and trying to work their way through some of the issues that these people in suits and hard hats have. But if we as a collective, there's much more than of us, and if we can empower us to influence them the way it should be, I think all the better. And I just see citizen science as a vessel for that.
Thank you.
No worries.
I just wondered how much work you do with other councils, because I know that our council goes out to bush and does some of that type of work. And I wondered if that was a collaborative thing that you do with other councils as well, with their bush care.
It really goes on the project. So my colleague just next week is going up to the Bellinger River and launching a turtle project, which is an endangered species. And one of the key drivers and interested parties is the council. So we don't want to, like, this is the thing, and it's a mistake that's happened in the past, and we don't want to continue it as a mistake going forward. As a state government, we don't want to come in and go, we know everything. We're the lead. We're pushing this. We want to help facilitate and guide the best. My team in particular want to help facilitate and guide, and that's why we're on the science strategy team and not necessarily on the fieldwork based team. So we want to be able to create and this new community of practice. And if we can get those local councils or community groups involved or provide new resource for them, that's what we're really aiming to do, and then support them through the early stages of their project. So going back to your question about OEH doing it, we are looking at it and we're definitely exploring where we can, where the project is. But there's the Royal Botanic Gardens is, I know you may have seen it, they've got Hollows as Homes as a project, and they had a lot of workshops and forums working with councils and really trying to explore where the hell are our hollows, and if there's no hollows, is that explaining why we don't have any of these birds or marsupials in our city anymore? So that's another one to look at, and it's been up by John Martin led that, and he's done a lot of work trying to get it up, and you've got to look at these partnerships. You can't just write them off.
All right, do we have any final questions?
Nope.
Well, thank you so much
No
for coming.
worries.
Did you have more on your slide?
Nope.
Thank you so much for coming, Patrick.
Thank you for listening.
A couple of gifts for you,
Oh,
so thank you for
thank
coming
you very
so
much.
I think there is huge potential for citizen science with libraries. We were saying about partnering and local history and all sorts of aspects. So go away and think about it and do a bit of research, and it's exciting.
Is that? Yes. No worries.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of things before we finish. I'm presuming that Ellen will be sending out some evaluation or feedback forms about today. So if you see those in your email box, if you could please fill it out. It really, really helps us to know what to do for future seminars. Of course, today has happened due to a lot of people, and in particular the Reference Information Steering Group. If you are interested in being on that group and helping us work out what we would like to do with our reference seminars, please get in touch with one of the members. We're always looking for new members to join us. It would be great. And I think that's all. That's it. Thank you very much for coming today, and safe journey home. How do I stop recording?